You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NAX. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Welcome to Convenience Matters again, everybody. My name is John Eichberger with the Fuels Institute and NAX, and I am joined today by my colleague,
Donovan Woods, also with the Fuels Institute. Happy to be here, John, and got a really good topic to talk about today.
I'm excited about it, Donovan. What are we going to be talking about today?
Can EVs actually be supported by the grid as it is right now?
I get that question all the time.
Looking for that answer.
Absolutely.
So to answer that question, or at least to get that topic going on, we have a special guest here, Erica Myers with SEPA. Now, what does SEPA stand for, Erica?
Sure. It stands for the Smart Electric Power Alliance. So the Solar Electric Power Association was our former name, and we rebranded about 2 years ago as an effort to expand our mission and our purview. So we knew that we could not talk about solar in a silo anymore. We had to talk about all the distributed energy resources together in order to actually make change in terms of the clean energy integration challenges.
Now, Erica, I found your name because I'm an avid LinkedIn supporter, and I'm looking at articles and blogs and things, and something was put up there that you had written about an article talking about your new report that was coming out by SEPA, Utilities and Electric Vehicles Evolving to Unlock Grid Value. And I thought, I've got to get her on the show to talk about this report. This seems like something our audience will want to talk about. Now, we can't go through the entire report. We won't get all the answers, and we'll actually want our guests to actually download this. But what's the gist of this report?
So we started out with an understanding that utilities are interested in electric vehicles. There's not been such a major load growth opportunity for them in many years. And with flat to declining load growth in a lot of their service territories, we knew that electric vehicles were a topic of great interest. And also, we wanted to make sure that we were on the right page in terms of where we were within the industry, how far they'd come in terms of implementing programs and activities, and where they kind of were within some sort of spectrum of development. And what we found was very few utilities have made a lot of effort to date in terms of their EV project deployments, which was very surprising to me. I would think that more utilities would have started something or some activities at some point. But we surveyed about 496 utilities, and of those, just over 300 had not done any activity at all. So the vast majority, about 3/4 of the utilities we surveyed, were what we would call early stage, which essentially means that they're starting to get their feet wet in the technology. They're putting EV information on their website for their consumers, making investments in their own fleets. But beyond that, really not making the next step into things like charging infrastructure deployment in public or workplace, or even kind of the late stage activity, which would be helping to manage the charging activities of those EVs to best time with lower demand or during high periods of solar and wind penetration.
So I guess that's one of the things I want to talk about. I give speeches throughout the country all year long, 30 or 40 a year. And almost every single time when it's time for questions, one of the first questions is, so, John, all this news about moving to electrification of the transportation fleet, how is the utility industry going to deliver the electricity increased demand we need when, one, we're already struggling in some markets to get enough power, and two, the distribution grid is fairly antiquated? Can it support an increase? And I've got my answers, how I respond, but how do you guys respond to that type of question?
The grid today is a modern marvel. We have invested trillions of dollars into this infrastructure that works amazingly well. Mm-hmm. We are very blessed here in this country to have such a reliable and affordable grid. And I talk to distribution engineers every day, and they are on the ground making sure that outages are resolved as quickly as possible, that they've got the best available technology that they're implementing, and that they are equipped for any kind of major emergency. What they see with EVs is we can handle this. We've handled lots of challenges in the past. The thing is, with EV penetration, it could become more problematic if it's done very quickly. So if distribution engineers are not able to forecast properly or understand when and where those EVs will hit, we're going to start to see challenges at the local level, particularly with transformers. One of the studies that was done by the Sacramento Municipal Utility District showed that based on projections out to 2030, they'll have to replace about 17% of their transformers at a cost of $50 to $100 million just for transformers. That's not including any of the other substation upgrades
and that's just
and things.
in Sacramento.
Just in Sacramento.
Right.
Yeah. So if we're talking about that across the whole country, we're talking theoretically trillions of dollars in upgrades. So how can we avoid some of those expenses? How can we manage that charging activity to avoid having all those vehicles charged simultaneously? And one of the ways you can do that a lot of utilities are thinking about today is called time of use charges, which is basically a discounted rate for charging off-peak. The problem with time of use charges is that not everybody responds to price signals, especially if they're very low price signals, right? So, for example, I know some people probably who go to convenience stores do respond very well to price signals. Even just a few pennies, they'll drive down the street and go to a different gas station.
When they're in your face, like gas prices are.
Right.
But utility prices are not paid every day.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, that's true. So for a lot of people who are charging their vehicle at home, like myself, I don't even notice a change in my bill, really, because my bill's already very high. So a few extra pennies, I really don't notice it.
Right.
And so the first thing first, you have to make sure that the price signal is correct. Second thing you'll want to make sure that you're incentivizing is people spreading out that charge over the course of the night. So what we're starting to see is something called a timer peak, where everybody sets their car to charge at the lowest time of the day, which let's say theoretically is 11 p.m. Then you start to see mini peaks on the distribution system as everybody starts to charge their car simultaneously. So if you could adopt a technology that would help to smooth out that load, then you don't have necessarily the quick ramp up that you would need at your generation stations, for example.
That benefits the utility as a whole, because you guys have to produce electricity round the clock anyway. And in the middle of the night, if you're producing electricity and nobody's using it, that's a wasted effort. So if we can get the EVs start to pull that power off the grid at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's got to help.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you can time it with the cheapest power, which actually right now is renewable, solar and wind are some of the cheapest power available on the grid. If you can time it with those, you actually could help reduce costs for everybody in the rate base, because that's typically how they come up with the rate structure is you average all the cost of the power generation over the course of an entire year. So the more kilowatt hours that you can use during negative price or very, almost zero, maybe a little bit higher than zero, that means that everybody benefits.
Agreed. Now, you mentioned that it would cost millions and millions of dollars just in a small city. The example was Sacramento. Who would pay for that infrastructure? Is it actually the taxpayers, or is it those who are current clients or customers of these power companies now? Is that how it would work?
Yeah, it's ratepayers.
Oof. Wow. So how does someone in that industry predict what will actually happen with EV sales over the course of time? What do they look at? Who are they talking to? How do they know?
So utilities have information available to them through proprietary data sets like Polk, IHS, for example. So they are customers of those sorts of data sets, so they can get a snapshot of what the vehicle sales are in their territories. And they also, I've talked to a lot of utilities that have fairly sophisticated forecasting tools and models at their disposal. They'll work with a consulting firm, for example, to get that forecast out in their service territory. But it's a little bit of a guessing game, and they don't really have what I would call real-time information available to them. What would be great is if they could potentially collaborate with an auto manufacturer, for example, that could share EV sales data with them on a weekly, maybe even a monthly basis, just so that they can continue to align those forecasts with actual real-time data.
Yeah, I think that regionality is important. I know in California, half of the EVs in the United States are in California, which raises other questions. Now, several years, I'm going back maybe 15, 20 years ago, California had some energy issues in terms of rolling brownouts and blackouts, scheduling those things. At the same time, they implemented the zero-emission vehicle program to try to electrify the transportation sector. How are we positioned in terms of being able to satisfy electricity demand currently and being able to ramp up production to satisfy a potential increase in demand if we do get to, say, 20, 30% EV penetration in the market?
So right now we have plenty of excess generation, actually. So it's required by lots of different regulatory oversight commissions that the utilities have a surplus of power so that in the event that there is an overage during peak hours, that they can, in fact, ramp up other generation assets and be able to accommodate those needs. And so right now we have plenty of generation. The issue is making sure that it's not going to be timed with the most expensive generation, because not all generation is created equally, right? Some is very expensive, especially those peaker plants.
Right.
So we have got to try to figure out ways to, again, shift that load to the periods of time when it's less expensive.
So let me raise another question before I let Donovan jump back in here. Is I hear this too, and it raises my eyebrows. The idea that electric vehicles can be viewed as an energy storage supply that, when plugged in during peak hours, could resupply electricity back to the grid to help mitigate the potential need for peakers and stabilize the supply. Is that something the utilities are really looking at, like a net metering for individual passenger vehicles? It seems a little difficult to swallow, considering net metering was such a huge policy issue in Washington.
Vehicle to grid is certainly a technology that a lot of utilities are looking at. I think that that's in conjunction with the broader discussion about battery storage. Unlike the fuels sector, for example, you guys have the ability to store your fuel for long periods of time and pull it out when you need it in emergency situations. Unfortunately, with electrons, it's not the case. Right. You have to use them instantaneously or things go bad.
And we want to find bad. Remember Ghostbusters? Egon, what's your definition of bad? We'll just leave that go.
Exactly. So we've got to figure out a way to store those electrons if we want to be able to, let's say, for example, put in more solar and put in more wind, because you've got to be able to match that load in such a way that you can hold it for other periods of time, right? If it's sunny, nobody needs those electrons at a certain period of time, let's say spring, then you have to curtail those systems. You have to turn them off, and that's kind of a waste, right? So if we had storage, for example, co-located with a solar plant, then you could theoretically store those electrons and use them later in the day. So similarly with electric vehicles, if you could have them parked and charging during periods of time when people aren't necessarily using a lot of those electrons, then you could use that fuel later for either driving or for putting them back into the grid for the utility, where you have multiple value streams. And that's really what I think people are looking for, is trying to define tangible value streams that can make the proposition for battery storage more economic.
Right.
And so vehicles having already been purchased for other purposes like transportation, if they were somehow able to incentivize a driver to, let's say, during peak periods or emergency situations, plug their car in and be able to contribute to the grid, there is definitely a tangible value associated with that. So that's really where the benefit comes in.
Yeah, conceptually, I get it. I'm really questioning the practical implementation of it and how consumers are going to think, hey, this is a good idea. I charged my car all last night. Let me plug it in so somebody else can use my electricity. I understand there's protections, there's controls, and all that stuff can be factored in. It's just that consumer mindset of I'm going to be an altruistic member of society. That has not been my experience in human behavior. But hopefully we can teach, right?
Well, there's altruism and then there's financial gain.
That's true. Okay.
That speaks to some people. Yes. Now, John, I remember a time a couple of years ago where your utility company reached out to you asking something similar, correct?
Yeah.
What was your reaction when they asked you to?
Well,
it
was about 5 or 6 years ago, and
Okay.
they said, John, if you buy an electric vehicle and you put in a level 2 charger at home, you can select from any one of these preferential rates if you program the car to charge in off-peak hours. Now, the rates they gave me, I assume they're preferential. I have no idea what my rate is, had no idea how great it was, and 5 years ago, I wasn't thinking about buying an electric vehicle. But it was a campaign that they did several years ago to try to spur the use of electric vehicles and charging stations in the low demand hours so they could stabilize that demand curve.
I think all stakeholders, from retailers to refiners to the government itself, always struggle with that factor, the consumer, educating the consumer on what the benefits are, and the consumer trusting that what they're hearing is the truth. There's one program, San Diego Gas and Electric. It seems like they are doing things the right way, or they're ahead of the curve, as it were. How did they get started, or what are any of the positives that you've seen from that?
Sure, yeah. So San Diego Gas and Electric, SDG&E, they're very forward-thinking utility. They're members of SEPA. We work very closely with their EV team. And they have initiated a program where they do day-ahead real-time pricing, or hourly day-ahead pricing signals for their EV customers. So they basically have an app on your phone that you can either automate, or you can actually go in manually and set the times that you want to charge your car to align with the cheapest rates over the course of that day. So for example, if it's, let's say you have it set, so I want to charge my car when it reaches 14 cents a kilowatt hour, then you can just keep your car charged or connected to the charger, and then it will automatically turn on during those hours.
The technology is unbelievable. And I think there's so many opportunities. I think it's just a lack of awareness.
Correct.
And, I've got a lot of people come up, hey, John, once we get to a certain point where there's so many EVs, electricity rates are going to go up. And I mentioned this before. But the consumer's not going to know that. The consumer sees gas prices on the corner every single day on these big signs. And they go up, they know it. They go down, they know it. But we pay our electricity once a month, usually an automatic debit from our checking account. We usually don't even know what the amount is until we go to balance check and go, oh, crap, how much did I use last year? But as you said, you don't recognize how much of that electricity bill is due to your EV. And you have this distance, this comfort of distance, that even if the utility rates start going up to cover infrastructure upgrades and EV demand loads, I really don't think the consumer is going to notice. And so this whole advocacy that the EVs might be cheaper to own, well, even if they're not that much cheaper from an energy standpoint, it's going to feel like they're cheaper because you're not shelling out $30 a week to fill up your car with gas.
That's true. And I think about, and this doesn't really compare with charging a vehicle, but 20 years ago, none of us were looking for outlets everywhere we went to charge our phones or our iPads or any mobile device. Yet I've never thought about what that effect has been on my power bill. Never. I'm sure it isn't dramatic because it's a small device, but it's the mind state. It's the mind of a consumer, how they think. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that's a lot easier for a consumer to get over because they don't think about their power bill in that way. Are there any things that are, of any utilities that are doing to educate consumers that have actually proven to be something useful?
So there's a lot of great examples of consumer education going on that the utilities are spearheading. They are a trusted energy source. Mm-hmm. A lot of people go to them for a wide range of topics, not just EVs. And so this is a great opportunity for utilities to get in front of their customers and help influence charging behavior now. The great examples that I've seen, for example, across the country, ride and drive events are a great way to get people interested in EVs. If they have a chance to drive one, they realize that it's actually a great car.
They're awesome to drive.
Oh, they're fantastic.
They're so much fun.
Oh, they're really, really fun. It's a smartphone on wheels.
Right.
It's really what it is.
And the acceleration, the torque
Much
off
quicker.
The line is just fantastic.
Exactly, yeah. So it's got fantastic torque. And if you're a DC driver like I am, getting around really slow people is really fun in my Leaf. So,
Yep.
There's a lot of great opportunities to showcase the technology. There's some other great examples of utilities who are at their local festivals with booths talking about EVs. There's examples. Maui Electric, for example, is working with their local communities to encourage EV use because the fuel prices are so high in Hawaii. Right. So this is an opportunity for them to work with their customers in a different way and say, hey, you guys don't have to spend $5.50 on your per gallon for fuel. You can spend instead a few pennies. So here's a great way to do it. And let's build this community support, put in DC fast chargers, and make this a possibility for you.
You know, Donovan, I've become over the last couple of years fairly bullish on my outlook for EVs. I think it's going to take a long time for them to get to a majority stake of vehicles on the road, but I think it's going to happen eventually. Mm-hmm. I think within the next 10 years, EVs will be on cost competitive footing with internal combustion engines without government support. I think battery technology is advancing. I think the key for consumer is not, people used to think you need a 500-mile range battery. No, you need a 10 to 15-minute recharge and a 300-mile range battery. And then people can go wherever they want to go anytime they want. So I do see the future coming. So I'm really glad that you guys are working on these things, because if we can figure out the energy balance and delivery strategies that make sense and secure the grid and provide us more reliable, readily accessed energy without having to rely on peakers all the time, which boost our prices, I think that's going to be a benefit for everybody.
I agree. And thank you for bringing up the idea of, it's also known as the gas station model, mm-hmm. which is essentially where instead of longer duration charging, you would have shorter duration charging mm-hmm. through the next generation of DC fast charging. So right now, people can spend 30, even 60 minutes for a charge at a DC fast charger. The next generation of chargers, ABB, for example, just released a 350 kilowatt charger, right. which would fuel your car in 8 minutes. Yep.
At Walmart at that. Yeah, just pulling up to a Walmart. That's, amazing. All right.
8 minutes. So basically the same amount of time it would take to fill your tank with gas. Mm-hmm. So that's a total game changer, I think, in terms of how people might get electricity. Is also a game changer for the utility in order to meet that demand.
But you're also talking about a big charge, like almost depleted to full, which we've always got stuck on this dwell time requirement. I equate it to your cell phone at the airport. If I'm down to 40% before I get on my plane, I'm looking for a charger. Even if I can only plug into the wall for 10 minutes, it's going to give me a 10 to 15% boost. I feel much better when I get off the plane. I'm able to get my Uber, get to where I need to go, not have to worry about it. I view EV drivers the same way. They're going to charge predominantly at home or at the office. But when they're driving around, need to make a stop to get a sandwich or go to the bathroom, if there's a charger they can plug in for 5 minutes, they're going to do it.
Yep.
And that's all they care about. Just give me the charge when I need it. So for retailers, when they ask me, so John, what do you think about EVs? I'm all, if you have the ability to install a charger on a route where people are driving long distances, that makes sense because they'll plan to stop at your store on the long route. Mm-hmm. But also in a competitive market, if you've got a charger and your competitor does not, the EV driver of today and in the future is going to, one, respect that you actually acknowledge they exist, and two, probably come to you for that 5 to 10 minute boost. And so it gives you that competitive edge. It's a small subset of the market right now, the EVs, but it's a growing subset, and they're passionate.
They're passionate, and their kids are growing up in a world where EVs exist already. All of us grew up in a world where they did not exist, and this is something new, and maybe we're a little bit fearful, but if you grow up seeing something, it's easy to transition into it. So it's a whole new market, and I think this is an interesting report for anyone to really take a look at. Now, Erica, where can we get this report?
You can get it on our website, which is www.sepapower.org.
This has been fantastic. Erica, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
And thank you guys for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.